The biggest mistake that US and Israel did is assuming that Iran will collapse once Khamenei will be killed.
And what we've left with is a regime that is still alive, still in place, still firing missiles, but much more ideological and hard-bitten than it was before.
Exactly. For Donald Trump, there is no good solution, bad solution. There are only bad solution, only bad options.
Danny Sitrinowicz, thank you very much for doing this interview. Let's start with the famous 15-point plan. Tell us about it. Does it exist? When did it first start? Do we know what's in it? Has it got a future?
Well, according for recent reports, yes, it does exist, but we have to say something important. Iran didn't accept the plan. It's a plan based actually or built in Washington. In main purpose is actually to stop the war. The Iranians actually got it through the mediation of the Turks and Egyptian and the Qataris, and maybe through the Pakistanis, but in the end of the day, it highlights two main things. One, that the US do not understand Iran, and they really think that Iran will capitulate, although they have the upper hand of the war. And second thing that it highlights is the fact that the administration, the American administration, for the first time, is willing to actually speak about lifting all sanctions over Iran. So I don't think I'm optimistic about this plan, but definitely it's a very interesting development during the war.
So did this plan originate in the last 3.5 weeks, or is it something that's much older from last year that's been kind of freshened up a bit?
It's much older, and it's very interesting to see that there was no change in the plan itself. Actually, the Americans still demanding the same thing they demanded from the Iranians before the war. So I don't understand how the Americans think that actually the Iranians would change their way of thinking. But it actually, again, it shows the fact that in the US administration, they don't think there is a change regarding Iran. On the contrary, some people say, especially the president, that maybe Iran is like Venezuela, so kicking out the supreme leader actually will change the Iranians' way of thinking regarding this plan. Unfortunately, what we have in Iran is much more radicalized government. This is why the answer for Iran will be no. They're not going to accept those 15 points.
So just to be clear, you don't think the 15 points is the off-ramp for this war?
Maybe Trump hoping that will be an off-ramp, but from the Iranian perspective, no. There are two main problems with the Iranian regime that we are facing right now. The first one is the fact that they're more radicalized because of the fact that at the end of the day, the RGC controlling Iran. The second thing, even worse than the first one, that you don't have hierarchy. Used to have it with Khamenei, the father. Now everything, you have leaders, and you have one supreme leader that actually nobody saw him, nobody knows whether it's
the son of Khamenei.
The son of Khamenei. So where we stand right now is radicalized regime with no central government. This is why it's going to be very hard for them actually to answer in a way that will be approved by Mujtaba or some other, the commander of the RGC, Vahidi. So two main problems that actually prevent the American side from actually negotiating in a way that can have sincere and meaningful negotiation. Maybe they will have a meeting, but at the end of the day, to reach an agreement with this regime, the US will have to capitalize, and not the Iranians.
Has the war against the regime, with 20,000 targets taken out by the Americans and the Israelis, softened them up or made them harder? Or maybe both?
Unfortunately, it made them harder. Now, it's miraculously, right? Because thinking about the firepower of Israel and the US. Now, say operationally, we have achievements. We have major achievements, especially in terms of the force buildup, the conventional force buildup of Iran, and decapitating the senior leadership, thus creating problem with the command of control. But, and this is a big but, strategically, the Iranians think that they are winning, not losing, because they're utilizing the asymmetric capabilities that they have. The missiles, the drones, the control of the bottleneck of the international economy, meaning the Hormuz Straits. So for them, they are winning the war of attrition, not losing. And if the war will end tomorrow with this regime in place, then strategically we'll find ourselves in a much worse position than we were before the war, despite all of the operational achievements.
Why?
Because of the fact that we have a regime that may be weaker, but more emboldened, more brave in terms of its ability, in way mindset of the fact that he's countering to the biggest superpower in the world, definitely in terms of the firepower. So for them, they managed to overcome the biggest challenge that they have since 79. They will be emboldened from it, and on top of that, they will still have the capacity to reach for a nuclear bomb. So for them, in their mindset, they overcome the worst, and now they have the ability to utilize it to build Iran as a strong country. Unfortunately, it will be more or less like Pakistan or North Korea in terms of the control of the RGC in the country itself, but for them it will be a big win. On top of that, they're not going to forgo Hormuz Straits. I have to mention that again and again. Even if the war will end tomorrow and Trump will end it tomorrow, the Iranians will control the Straits. They will use it like the Suez Canal, taking money, extorting money from tankers, from countries that want to pass the tankers in the Straits themselves.
Why haven't they done that before in their 47 years since the revolution?
I don't want to say that Iran was pragmatic, but the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, the father, was cautious in operating its capabilities, cautious in thinking that the international community will see Iran as a threat. This is why he was very risk averse in a way that he thought about every move that he's taken, whether it's going to increase the pressure on the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I think in the past he assumed that controlling the Straits will be very problematic for Iran because it actually will push countries like the US to attack Iran, or also it create a lot of problem with the Gulf states. And for him, it was for his part, for his views, for him it was extremely important to have this kind of repertoire process with those countries. So he was very risk averse, and he was hoping that nobody would take this kind of an action because he was afraid of the implication, the negative implication on the Islamic Republic. So again, he wasn't pragmatic, but I think he was hoping or dictate a policy that eventually wanted to protect Iran from attacks like the US and Israel.
So despite the brutality that he ordered against his own people, the demonstrators, in January, he was the wrong guy to take out on day one of the war.
Well, it depends what you wanted to achieve. If the idea was toppling the regime, definitely you want to kill all of them, right? But the problem that the US have right now is they are trying to negotiate with the same people that they want to topple. So killing Khamenei was the right thing if you want to topple this regime. It's the wrong thing if you want to negotiate with the regime. Same goes to Ali Larijani. Now again, those people are not more moderate and not pragmatic. But if you want to have a negotiation and reach an agreement on the nuclear side, you should keep Khamenei alive. If you want to topple this regime, okay, go kill them, but then trying to negotiate with the same country you wanted to topple, this is a major problem that you have right now.
But the reason why they've got themselves into this bind is that they thought by killing Khamenei on day one, the regime would topple, and it didn't.
The biggest mistake that the US and Israel did is assuming that killing Khamenei will topple this regime. The biggest problem that they have. Why? Because nobody thought about the day after. The biggest mistake that US and Israel did is assuming that Iran will collapse once Khamenei will be killed. Now, this is a very problematic situation, and why? Because they didn't think about exit strategy, off-ramps, nothing. Now, obviously...
Because they didn't think that they had to.
Exactly. Obviously, CENTCOM knew that the Iranians going to close the Straits. It was obvious because the Iranians practiced to it before the war started, and they mentioned that in open source information. So everybody knew that. But I think that Trump and Netanyahu thought that it doesn't matter because they have the idea in their mind is eventually the regime will collapse. Now we have a problem. We're in an attrition war. Yes, we have supremacy operationally, Air Force-wise and intelligence-wise, goes without saying. But this is not being accumulating in a strategic effect, meaning that this regime is not going to be toppled. We're going to hit him back and forth, but in the end of the day, this regime is going to stay, as mentioned, more radicalized. So the basic problem is that the flawed assumption about the strength of a regime and the overestimation of the firepower of Israel and the US led to the problem that we are facing right now.
So the things that America set out to do at the beginning of the war have not happened, and the result has been totally counterproductive. And what we've left with is a regime that is still alive, still in place, still firing missiles, but much more ideological and hard-bitten than it was before.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'll say even more than that. Yes, definitely the regime is suffering. If the war will end tomorrow, the regime has mounting problems to counter economically, society-wise, even rebuilding its capacity because the destruction level is high. It's not because Israel is only Israel attacking Iran, but also the US is attacking Iran with the B-1 and B-2s and its firepower. So definitely they have a mountain to climb. But I wouldn't estimate their ability to rebuild the capacity. And we have to think that they created what I call a rally around the flag phenomena. Not 90 million people supporting them, but the 20 million that supporting regime supporting them now, right now. Even more than that, they're actually using the attacks of the US and Israel, demonstrating to the people that at the end of the day, the war is not against the regime. It's against Iran itself. So I think it will be very hard to see people going to the street the day the war will end. And even more than that, we have a regime that I'm afraid that in terms of the nuclear side, this is something that I think they will consider to changing the Supreme Leader fatwa, the previous one, and actually is thinking whether it's a good time to rush into a bomb.
The spirit of Kabbalah.
Exactly, the spirit of Kabbalah, and even more than that, it's very tricky because when you are in Israel and you are US, you have such a superiority. When you have such an intellectual superiority, you really think that you can do A, B, and C, and the regime will be toppled. The problem is that you cannot accumulate in your assessment, the history, the culture, the spirit of Kabbalah, all those things. You cannot read that in the intel reports, and this is a problem that happened right now. Yes, we have superiority. Yes, we have capabilities. But in the end of the day, the Iranians are not going to be toppled, not going to be toppled easily. In order to topple them, you really need to extend your military activities in a way that I'm not sure Israel and the US are ready to do that.
Is the problem, the recurring problem here, that America and Israel, to some extent, get seduced by the smartness of their military weapons?
Exactly. In the end of the day, you are believing in, yes, the firepower is amazing, but somebody told me that if you are calculating how many bombs you dropped on Iran, you are in a problem. Because if you are looking at your achievements only by the number of bombs, this is not a real achievement. Now, I'm not saying there are achievements, of course, in terms of the force buildup and the capitation, all those things go without saying. But the end of the day, just think what the Iranian thinking. We are managing to overcome it. Even more than that, despite everything that they are doing, we are still here. And on top of that, in an attrition war, we will win. Because yes, they can bomb us back and forth, but in the end of the day, we are standing, and for how long Israel and the Gulf states will able to sustain what's happening here. Iran is a big country. It's able to sustain it. Israel is a small country. Every missile, 500,000, 2 million people are going into the shelters. And this is something that the Iranians trying to capitalize.
So Donald Trump faces a choice now. You either negotiate with the regime that is still alive and perhaps more radical than the regime that you had before, and it's still firing missiles, and it's able to extract a better price, or you go in all in with your soldiers and all the rest of it.
For Donald Trump, there is no good solution, bad solution. There are only bad solutions, only bad options. Option one is expanding the war. For example, attacking the electricity in Iran, and then the Iranians are going to retaliate. The price of oil will sky high, and everything will be, I think, in terms of, we'll see the Gulf actually inflame literally. Or you have the capacity or the ability to use the Marines that just came to the Gulf, maybe conquering Hag, or maybe conquering...
Does that make a big difference?
No, because at the end of the day, there is no silver bullet solution to the Iranian problem. Even if you take Hag, what will happen is the Iranians will retaliate hard against the forces, 25 kilometers from the Iranian shores, and against the Gulf states. Even more than that, they're not going to open Hormuz Strait. So you can do that, but it's not going to make a difference. Second thing goes to the Hormuz Straits. In order to conquer the Hormuz Strait, they need much more than 10,000 or how much they have right now. They can take the 3 islands.
So you either invade the country with all the risks that entails, or you do a deal with the people they would regard as the devil.
Exactly, and the deal, as we know, will be a very harsh deal. Trump have 2 solutions now regarding a deal. Or to say, I couldn't care less about Hormuz Straits and I won. They don't have Navy, they don't have Air Force, and that's it. Or he can reach a deal, but in that deal, the Iranians demand guarantees that nobody will attack him in the future. They want compensation. They want to keep controlling the Hormuz Straits. Nobody will speak about our missile capacity. And I don't think they're going to forgo those requirements. So Trump needs to understand, or I'm expanding, or eventually I'm reaching an agreement that I'll have to, I would say capitalize, but I have to understand that I have to embed the Iranian requirements within the agreement itself.
Which one do you think he'll go for?
Well, it's very hard to know because it's very easy or easier to analyze the Iranians than Donald Trump. I think that the fact that he posed or gave an ultimatum and actually preferred to postpone the ultimatum shows that he's really trying to see whether there is a way to reach a political agreement. Now, again, depending on, he will understand, I think, quite easily that the Iranians are not going to dance within tango in a way that they are going to challenge him and they're going to demand strict things for him. And then we'll have to decide within the end of 5 days ultimatum, or we're going to extend that, saying that there are real negotiations or whatever. I think in the end of the day, again, my assessment that he will try to do the utmost to prevent an expansion of the war. I'm not saying not going to expand the war because we saw in the past, but I think that he will try to do the utmost, including delaying the ultimatum, because I think that he understands completely the implications of the economical implications, the security implications of extending the war.
So he's basically spent 3.5 weeks bombing the Iranians politically into a stronger position to where they were before this war.
Yeah, strategically we're not in a better situation than we were before. On the contrary.
But he will be able to say, I've weakened them militarily, as he keeps saying. I declare victory on the military front, and I've now done a deal with them.
Yeah, definitely, regardless what will happen, Trump will say he won. Okay. And I think there are achievements. He can say there is no Air Force, no Navy, and he can say, for me it's enough, I'm closing a deal with them. The problem is, for example, what will happen with 440 kilos for 60%? If the Iranians want to rush to
uranium, the enriched
uranium that it's in Isfahan or Fordow, whatever, if the Iranians want to rush into a bomb, they will use that. It's actually a leverage to them, so it's a problem. We cannot end the war with this uranium staying in Iran. So you can or find a way diplomacy-wise to take it out, or some military action that would be very hard to do so. So that's the option that he has regarding that. On top of that, you have to remember that at the end of the day, this regime will be more radical, more to the extreme, and it will rebuild its capacity. Goes without saying, if someone thinks that we're able to deprive their ability to build missiles or rushing into a nuclear bomb, I think it's mistaken, because everything is indigenously. They have their own capacity to build or rebuild their capabilities. 2
quick questions, then we're done. The Israelis are probably not satisfied with Trump declaring victory, but the regime there staying in place. Do they have the capacity to bring Trump back to the military, to the battle? And by so-called mowing the lawn. What can Israel do, basically, to keep this going?
Well, Israel depends on Trump. At the end of the day, if Trump decides to stop, he will stop. The thing is that Israel won't be content with any agreement with this regime, because any agreement, by definition, will strengthen the regime.
And what can they do about that?
Nothing. Israel cannot do nothing, because Netanyahu cannot challenge Trump whatsoever. He's so connected to him with so many reasons. He will try to work behind the scene to pressure Trump to understand that this is the moment to try to enhance the activities. But at the end of the day, if Trump will decide to reach an agreement, nothing can do about it.
Is the Israeli government panicking right now?
I think they are very worried. Not because the chances now of reaching agreement are slim. As mentioned, the 15 points and the Iranian demands, there's no alignment between them. So definitely for now, I don't think that somebody thinks that there is a chance for an agreement. But I think that in Israel, there is a fear that Trump wants to finish this war. And in order to finish this war, he will be willing to give the Iranians something dramatic that even before the war he wasn't ready to give them.
Like
for example, from easing of sanctions to everything related to, okay, you can build your missiles, or just promise me that you're not building a bomb and that's enough for me. So those things can happen. I think Israel is more worried from what Trump can give them in the future than those 15 points, because those 15 points are just a piece of paper. Iranians won't agree for those 15 points.
The one thing that we haven't mentioned, the one component of the Iranian people who hate the regime, the people who are on the streets in January. Have they gone away? Are they in their bunkers? Are they coming out again? Will they pluck up the courage when it gets quieter to try and bring down the government?
First, we don't have, the crystal ball. We don't know what will happen the day after.
Yeah.
Things can happen, we don't know. The problem is that we started the war based on the assumptions that people will go to the street. This is a problem that I have with this war, not with the question of people will go out or not. Now, when the war will end, definitely can people go out. But we have to remember a couple of things. First, this regime will be more extreme than the previous one, so we won't hesitate to use any force in its means to prevent that from happening. Second, we have a rally around the flag phenomena, at least for the supporters of the regime. And third, this regime enjoys actually the credibility of countering the US and Israel.
Yeah.
So I think for the shorter time, I don't think we'll see any change. Now, yes, for the longer period of time, the regime still have many problems, especially economy, society, and things like that. So I'm assuming they will have to do the adjustments.
Right. But so even on the subject of regime change coming from the bottom of Iranian society, this has been counterproductive.
Of course. It's counterproductive in a way. How you expect people to go to the street when bombs are falling on you? How you can expect people to go to the street when you're bombing also civilian infrastructure? How you can expect people to go out on the streets when at the end of the day you don't have an opposition, and the only opposition that you have is opposition outside of Iran that have zero influence over Iran. So, and how you can, and at the end of the day, I think there was overestimation of the Mossad or state capabilities to push people out to the streets, than actually understanding that the Iranian society, and the fact of the matter is that during a war, and I think also after the war, you won't see people going to the streets. So it's another flawed assumption. Again, operationally, great success. Strategically, a failure. And I think in the end of the day, as mentioned before, the strategic situation of Israel and the US and the Gulf states regarding Iran is actually worse than it was before the starting of the war.
Danny Sitrinowicz, thank you very much.
Thank you.